am simply observing your attempts at casting magic is all. What I think? Well, last night's escapade certainly taught you that there must be will and intent when you cast. That much is certain with that furrowed brow of yours. However, you are still struggling. No, I don't think I'll answer why you are struggling. Instead, I ask you, what are the 3 fundamentals of casting magic? Not quite right. Perhaps we should spend more time in the study than out in the field. The 3 fundamentals of casting magic are will, connection, and technique. For one to successfully cast a spell, the will must be there. Focus, concentration. Imagine exactly what you wish to happen, what you wish to will into the world, whether it be a ball of fire, a protective shield, or a life-sapping grasp. Envision the power you wish to wield, that you will into the universe. Connection, what grounds you to the world and allows you to pull mana from the weave. Though quiet and seemingly lifeless these forests look, there is mana everywhere. From the birds, the trees, to the very stones in the earth. Every aspect of this world, including us, has some form of connection to the weave. How we pull at these connections may vary. Some come from spellbooks, some come from arcane crystals, and some come from a variety of arcane components that correlate to the spell you wish to cast. The lucky 1 in a billion few share an innate connection to the weave, however, to pull directly from it without risk or consequence, such as I. And finally, technique. The smooth flick of a wrist, the relaxation of the eyes staring past infinity, the particular way an incantation rolls off of the tongue. Your spell, your magic, is a song, and your body, the instrument. You must not only will your power, you must not only attain your connection to the weave, you must let the weave flow through you, and let your body act as the conduit. That is why we struggle with arcane sickness. When one overuses their spells, overexerts their mana and energy, they all fizzle out eventually. A plant can only be pruned so many times. A river can only be fished so often. And the trees of a forest may only be cut down so often until all resources are depleted, like they are now. Perhaps you are suffering from some level of arcane sickness, but I can tell you have fallen back to old habits. Your technique is far from flawless, but I get the sense it's not due to the lack of focus, rather the lack of ability to maintain one's body. What I'm saying is you are exhausting yourself, and by the looks of it, you may be coming down with something. No, not the arcane sickness. That is far more detrimental to one's health. I mean a literal sickness. I believe you may have a cold. No, no, no. That simply won't do. I told you I had no interest in babysitting a sick little royal because they were too stubborn to avoid practicing in the cold, rainy weather after a night of being fed on in the cold wind. Well, perhaps I may share a part of the blame there. But regardless, you have no business being outside in these conditions. It's time we go back inside. No, I don't say that because I don't want to be in the rain. I say that because you look like you could collapse at any moment. Tell me, does a royal ever slouch like that? Or buckle at the knees just to try to stand up straight? You're not well. Mortal? Hey. I got you. You're freezing. Let's get you inside. Mortal. Mortal. Finally, you're awake. You were making troubling noises in your sleep. Having a nightmare, I take it. Oh no, I'm not making fun of you. You're alone in a vampire's castle in a lifeless kingdom. Surely it's not the most settling place for you mortals. What was it about? You don't wish to speak of it? If that's what you desire, then so be it. Where are we? Well, in my study, of course. You were soaking wet, so I had you changed, and I wrapped you up in a velvet sheet here on the couch with me. Though, please do try not to stretch much. Your feet are nearly touching me. Thank you. Now, onto your scolding, little mortal. What did I say about overexerting yourself? You were overexerting yourself, little mortal. You're plagued and yet continue to push your mind and body past its limits. You have these limits for a reason, mortal. Well, yes, of course you do have to push yourself to make progress. However, there's a difference between pushing yourself and working so hard you become a detriment to yourself. Tell me, when one wishes to become physically stronger, do they lift far too heavy weights until their bones break? No, because now they will spend weeks, maybe even months recovering, when they could have spent that time challenging themselves at a steady, reasonable pace that wouldn't set them back. It may take you weeks to recover from this, and I am not fond of acting as a caregiver for the sick. Your apologies mean nothing, as your words will not heal you. If you wish to make it up to me and to yourself, instead of simply saying that you're sorry, instead focus on recovering and getting better. I mean it when I say you better not work until sickness again, little mortal. I will not tolerate that within my domain. Do you understand? Good little mortal. Now I implore you to rest and relax. Let your body recover. Mortal, you were laying your head on my lap. Reading between the lines, that was not a simple observation, that was a question as to why. Seek warmth by the fire, as you'll find no such comfort with me. It's more comfortable this way. And I'm supposed to care. I said, relax, didn't I? Ugh, you test me, mortal, do you know that? Fine, rest your head on my lap. It matters not. Perhaps I may continue on with our lesson, now that there are no distractions. Would you like that? Good. Now tell me, what are the 3 fundamentals of casting magic? Good. Will, technique, and connection. Now, can you recite to me what those 3 fundamentals mean? Starting with will. Good answer. You may be stubborn, but at least you listen well. Now, technique. While mostly correct, that's not entirely true. Despite what some scholars may say, there is no one perfect form to cast a spell. Rather, there is a perfect form for an individual. What do I mean? Recall my analogy. The spell and magic is a song, and your body the instrument. Now tell me, say if you learn a fine and lovely little melody on a piano, the root, followed by the 5th, a minor 7th, and back to the root. You learn to play that little melody perfectly on a piano. Following along? Good. Now, if someone were to take away that piano and hand you a violin in which you have no experience playing, could you play that melody? Exactly. Most likely not. Each and every one is an individual instrument, and to play our melody of magic, we must learn to attune to our bodies and play our own melodies. These pathetic whelps of teachers attempt to claim that there is a single perfect form to cast a spell to create a ball of light. A cut and dry way that everyone can cast this spell. However, what sets those pathetic teachers from real geniuses such as I is the realization and the recognition that we are not all cut from the same mold. While possibly similar in style, your orb of light may not cast the same way as my orb of light does. The job of a proper magic teacher is to observe the very soul of their student, study their progress, find what works for them. Does that make sense? Wonderful. Now finally, connection. You hadn't quite understood that. What part exactly? Innate connections. I see. Well, it's not a commonly taught subject due to their rarity. We have practiced with several arcane tools, have we not? Yes. Spellbooks, wands, staffs, spell components, the whole lot that I have to my disposal. When the common mage performs magic, when all is right, when the will is strong and focused, when their technique is honed and perfected, they are able to properly pull mana from the weave and expel it outward. However, simply ripping mana from the weave is dangerous, so they use a connection to act as a conduit through the weave, through their body, through their arcane tool of connection, and into the world. A wizard casting a bolt of lightning from his crystal staff, a mage pulling the runes and arcane scripts from their spellbook, a bloody hag boiling together eyes of newts and pig's blood, items that carry mana within. These are all tools to direct the mana one draws in themselves from the weave and out into the world. Through technique and will, that energy, that mana, is pulled out from the weave and stored within oneself. Some may have a greater capacity to hold mana than others. Some have a greater ability to recover said mana than others. Regardless, your soul becomes the battery for this charged mana, and all that energy must be bottlenecked and shot out of some connection point that takes the energy from yourself into the world. This is what is commonly taught, and what the majority of arcane inclined use to cast their spells. However, in incredibly rare cases, one is born with an innate connection. Imagine this. Grand Arc wizards, highest amongst their ranks, often will have incredible capacities to maintain mana within themselves, to expel that energy to perform something incredible, such as a mile-wide protective shield, a meteor shower, or create massive portals to other dimensions. It doesn't always take the entirety of one's mana to do so. However, they must push that great amount of energy through a bottleneck. A cheap quartz crystal wand trying to cast astral projection will simply implode. It's pushing too much energy through too tight and weak of a conduit. Hence why Grand Arc wizards use such incredibly powerful artifacts that can withstand such power. Now, what an innate connection is, it is a natural-born ability to cast one's magic. Imagine through will and technique, you may pull mana from the weave, store it within one's body, and you have no need for any outside connection. No spellbook, no staves, no components, no bottleneck that limits your ability to cast what you wish. All that limits you is your own ability to maintain mana you pull from the infinite weave, in what you choose to do with it. Some of those fools who call themselves arc wizards believe they are only able to cast such spells a limited amount of times per day because they drain themselves of mana. Quite the contrary. They may have simply halved their reserve, yet their outer connection is like a red-hot melting piece of metal that must be cooled before use, lest it be destroyed. That is a tribulation that the likes of those born with innate connections like us do not have. If you recall, whenever I've casted my magics, have you heard me recite any incantations? Weaved any runes? Pulled out some flimsy book or staff? No. I simply let the weave flow through me and I use it to my will. Yes, I said those born with innate connections like us. You and I are one and the same. Oh, darling. You seem confused. Yes, you've been training with books and wands, learning weaving techniques and spell components. That is so you can understand the foundation of casting magics. However, in due time, you won't need such tools. How do I know? Well, do you recall when I told you to run away into the woods? Ugh, yes, I know how scary it was for you. You've told me 1,000,000 times, and it was just last night. Get over it. That's not the point. The point is, when you thought you were on the brink of death, with no wand, no book, no incantations to be spoken, you hurled a powerful spout of flame towards me, with nothing but your innate connection. Our goal is to get you comfortable with casting magics in the traditional sense, so that you will familiarize yourself with the feeling of the mana within you, so that in time you may drop your training wheels and fly. Yes, there's that smile. This is the most energy I've seen you have all day. I suppose I am playing with your hair. My apologies. Old habits. I won't do it again. You don't mind? Well then, I suppose I wouldn't mind continuing. It's a bit nostalgic, isn't it? Well, of course not with you. It was just some time ago, long before I became what you see before you today, the Lord of the Night. So they hadn't taught you much of that history, have they? It's to be expected. Most countries don't wish to teach their shame and failures to their people anyways. How did I earn the title? Well, through the War of the Long Night, of course. Many centuries ago, I alone had started a war with your darling country of Renovamen, as well as several others. It was quite the spectacle. What caused the war? Well, you see, those in power fear what they cannot control, and I had grown to become something that many countries could not control. Believe it or not, my innate connection wasn't always along the lines of blood magic, darkness, and necromancy. When I was nothing but a mortal man, my innate connection was closer along the lines of healing and abjuration. Quite the switch, wasn't it? Ah, yes. I was the greatest healer known to man. Thousands, hundreds of thousands flocked to me for aid. A soldier with a severed leg, grown back healthier than it was before. A brawler with a shattered arm. Not only did his bones heal perfectly, the very fibers of his muscles were reinvigorated. I saved hundreds of thousands from plagues and painful deaths. Had it not been for my request not to, they would have worshipped me as a god. But the royals of the neighboring kingdoms I'd wander into didn't like that their people held more faith in a stranger than their own kings and queens. And I suppose it just made the right combination of royals angry and, well, they retaliated. They had placed a powerful curse upon my wife. Yes, I had a wife during my mortal life. Well, she was a beautiful woman. Skin like porcelain and marble. Blue eyes as bright as the stars above. Hair as dark as the night sky. And a smile as bright as the moon. She was lovely, and despite my incredible talents, she never failed to be the one to impress me. She had a very special affinity, an innate connection, lunar magics, a force as powerful as the moon above that pulls the tides of the earth, yet as elegant and graceful and gentle as the shining stars of the night sky. An affinity unlike anyone had ever seen before throughout all of history. It was magnificent and beautiful, almost as much as she was. Well, when she fell ill, despite all of my best efforts and all of my magics, working myself to exhaustion, they had all failed. My innate connection, my affinity, I had failed. I became desperate, seeking power anywhere I could. That is where I found the ancient and forgotten ways of vampirism, blood magic, necromancy. So I pursued it. Nothing I had tried worked. So I sacrificed it all, left it all behind. My status, my innate connection, my humanity. I'd sacrificed it all to save her, despite her wishes. After years and years of growing my power, when I came closest to relieving her of her curse, perhaps the curse holder knew of my progress. When I was on the cusp, she had passed. virus had taken her. All of my attempts at resurrection had failed. I poured my cold, dead heart and soul into anything and everything to bring her back. Resurrection, reanimation, soul capturing, hell, even reincarnation. But seemingly to no avail. It was at that moment that I realized I was no longer me. What little piece of humanity I had left was finally ripped from my hollow chest. And I no longer saw them the same as I was. Was I truly the inhumane one? Was I truly the monster? No. They had brought it upon themselves. They had brought everything upon themselves. And in my darkened rage, I had started the War of the Long Night. A shadowy void, so dark it rended the sun from the sky and cast the world into an eternal darkness. A night lasting a full year. A bitter cold took the earth. Crops wilted and kingdoms starved. My shadow spawned lurked in every corner of the abyss that I had turned the world into, ready to maim and eviscerate all signs of life. Knights, heroes, legends, all across the lands sought me out to bring an end to my cruel reign. All perished, bloodless. What ended the war? In hindsight, it is quite silly. The chances of what had happened actually happening. In a cruel and sadistic act, I admit, when all the kingdoms and their people seemingly lost hope of a bright future, I thought I'd lift the veil for one day, just to spark the slightest bit of hope in them, only to rip it away like they had ripped her from me. And well, when you don't sleep and you don't see the sun and the moon for months at a time, one tends to lose track of the hour when you have to stare at clocks to know when a day is officially passed. I had lifted the veil from the safety of my castle, expecting the horrendous and bright sun to shine down upon their lands. Though bright, it wasn't the sun that shined, but rather the full moon. And I gazed into its beauty. I thought, maybe, but for a moment, I could hear her. My love. And she was weeping. It wouldn't have been what she wanted. She was always such a delicate and forgiving soul. So I paid respect for the dead and acted upon what she would have wished for. I ended the war. I'd claimed my borders and territory fairly, with the demand that I wouldn't be pestered for the rest of eternity. The kingdoms would compensate me by sending donations of blood to keep my vampiric appetite sated. And in return, I wouldn't pursue their kingdoms, nor reignite the war. did I forgive them? No. I may have spared them their well-deserved fate, but mortals are far from forgiveness. You will never know. They will never know. No one will ever know just how much I have lost. And after all, what I lost was known to them. All of them knowing just what they had done to me. To my wife. Not one soul apologized for what happened to her. I'd considered several times throughout the centuries as the years passed, with no apologies, no forgiveness, I would consider reigniting the War of the Long Nights. The only thing stopping me being the moon above. Now tell me, little mortal, do you regret choosing me to be your teacher? You're sorry. For what? For all that had happened to me. For all the pain. Enough. While I appreciate the sentiment, you, little mortal, are far from the cruel royals who had wronged me, which, might I add, are long dead by now. There's no point in you being the sorry one when those who should have sought forgiveness are no longer here. It's fine. You don't have to explain yourself. I apologize. I don't quite know what came over me. I've been rambling, haven't I? You, my little mortal, are supposed to be relaxing, not listening to some ancient man's story. You should get some rest. Shall I take you to your bed to sleep? No? Well, where shall I take you to then? You wish to sleep here on my lap? I will allow it this once. Consider it a prize for managing to stay awake during my lesson. Now hush. Not another word from you, my little mortal. Get some rest. And sleep well. I shall watch over you.